Had just raised a Series A, and it was a great ride because within a year of me being there, we sold the company for $750 million.
Whoa. This is the Angel Next Door podcast, where we will talk about all things angel investing. What it is, who does it, how do we find them, what does it mean to invest in an early stage company? If you have ever wondered how you can affect the change you want to see in the world, then tune in to learn more. In this episode, I'm talking to Melissa Wallace, the powerhouse behind Fierce Foundry, the first Femtech venture studio built specifically for female founders. Melissa shares her inspiring journey from a major tech exit to launching a groundbreaking model that's transforming how women build and scale startups. You'll hear the inside story of her $750 million exit, learn how venture studios differ from incubators and accelerators, and discover why this model is uniquely positioned to help women founders succeed faster. Plus, Melissa teases the innovative companies Fierce Foundry is currently building, including an AI-powered tool supporting dementia patients and a behavioral investing platform for women. Enjoy the show. Melissa, welcome to the Angel Next Door podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been a fan of the podcast, but you know what I'm a bigger fan of, Marcia?
What's that? Tell me.
I have to tell you. Seeing how often people repost from your podcast.
Oh, that's
in
nice.
Like newsletters, like people share it beyond just their listening, which
Love that.
Quality
Love that.
fun.
Love that.
Yeah.
I even got to a point where I put playlists on the website. So if any of the listeners out there don't know that, if you're interested in one particular topic, you can go to my website, which is just marciadawood.com, and you can see the playlists. So exciting. Melissa, tell us a little bit about your background and a little bit about Fierce Foundry.
Sure. So I spent most of my career, almost 30 years here, in marketing. I started in entertainment and consumer marketing and eventually went to work at my first tech startup, which I guess was about 3 years old when I went in there, built the marketing team. Had just raised a Series A, and it was a great ride because within a year of me being there, we sold the company for $750 million.
Whoa, that's cool.
It was crazy. And of course, once you experience that, you're hooked. And I went on to work at 2 more tech startups, actually several after that, but realizing that I enjoyed working with the early stage startups more than anything. And for my level of experience, it didn't make sense for me to be hired at these companies. So I partnered up with one of my former coworkers and launched a marketing agency for early stage tech startups, High-Foot Marketing. And really, like, first time in my life, just doing the work that I loved, but I was meeting so many female founders who were coming to me and saying, I have an investor lined up. They said, once I show customers, they'll invest. And they basically had bootstrapped, had some early funding, but definitely not enough to be spending on marketing. And so I went to my co-founder, Laura, and said, we need to volunteer some of our time here because we're just meeting female founder after female founder. And it was just starting to really affect me. And so we did. We started just volunteering time. And I started to love that even more. Turned that into a 501c3 and then went on to have this growing mentoring community where founders could get access to designers or finance people where they'd be willing to donate their time. And it was a year and a half ago when I met with the board of the nonprofit and said, we can do more. We have built this amazing network, and 5'2" marketing is part of this studio system with high alpha innovation. I'm going to do some research, but I think that we should do something different here. And that led us to embarking on this new journey of Fierce Foundry, the first Femtech venture studio for female founders.
Yes, and if anybody's watching on YouTube, you can see I have my Invest in Women Fierce Foundry button on, and you have your t-shirt on. I love that. Okay, wait, but though before we get too far into the studio, you have to tell us, how did it go down that with the big exit? Like, how many employees were there at the time?
Yeah, I think we had just probably hit somewhere between 150 and 200 employees. And we were still actively hiring because it was just growing that fast. And
what did the company do exactly?
It was a social media management tool. And it was acquired by Salesforce, which eventually became the Salesforce Marketing Cloud, if you know of that today, the social component of the Marketing Cloud. They had acquired a couple companies, the ones that would do the email marketing and the social media, and Buddy Media was the name of our company that was acquired and pulled into the Salesforce Marketing Cloud, which we had the pleasure of working at for a year. And I kind of joke because anybody who's been through an acquisition, that transition is not the easiest. I think I had 3 different bosses in a 6-month time.
Oh, wow.
My team shifted, my purpose shifted. It was a bit crazy, but then they eventually laid off a majority of the company and basically kept dev and customer service, I think, for the most part. There were some individuals on the marketing front that stayed, but luckily I was able to take my team to the next company.
Oh, nice.
So
That's awesome.
yeah, it worked out well.
So explain what you mean by the first Femtech venture studio. Are you
So
calling it a venture studio?
we are calling it a venture studio, but I should clarify to state that a venture studio, it's not a VC model and it's not a accelerator or an incubator. The studio model, when it's connected to a venture, is a combination of things. It's basically co-founding companies at the ideation stage and staying with those companies until exit or scaling at a point of ready to let them leave the nest. And I say that because we have not raised a fund yet. We are in a stage of proof of concept. We're building 2 companies right now, and we're providing those services to our community that still exists today. So we're more in the studio mode, hoping to have our proof of concept, and then we're going to go out and raise the fund.
I see. And so who comes up with the ideas and how, like the 2 companies you're working on right now, where did they come from?
Yeah. So in the studio models, which by the way, I think last year there was like somewhere between 500 and 600 of them, and it's growing pretty quickly.
Oh,
And I should also point out, we're calling ourselves the first Femtech venture studio. There is one other based in Israel that we had an amazing conversation with. They're not really referring them to themselves in the same way, which is why we're saying the first. But there are really no studio models that are dedicated to women and female founders. And that to me is a little bit mind-blowing considering how well, and I can talk in detail about why this works for women in particular. But going back, what was the question?
like what you mean exactly by a venture studio? If it's not an incubator, it's not an accelerator, it's not a venture firm, then what is it?
Yes. And the ideas, where the ideas come from.
Yeah, where
right?
are the ideas?
So it's all of those things in one. And the idea, so I guess my point was that every studio model that is out there is very different. There's not really one like way to do it. And I think that's great, especially for us, because we've had to navigate specifically what would work best for women. You can talk to other studio founders who will say, you can only do it this way. It has to be your idea, and you bring in different talent to take on that idea. In fact, the one that I mentioned, Impact 51, based out of Israel, their idea is really about focusing on female founders, but they're looking at challenges first and how they would solve for them. Their model is actually like something that we're going to look into a little bit more, but it's definitely this, okay, idea first, then founder, then we go and we build it together. There are models that are like absolutely 100% that way. And then there are the other way where it's founders coming in with their ideas. Our first 2 companies are both. And as much, there were people who advised that we should pick a lane. We decided, especially in this proof of concept, let's see what we get here. And Allison Malone came to us with an idea for an AI tool for dementia patients because of her experience in working in that field. And we love the idea. We built a prototype. It's pretty incredible what can be done with AI and how this solves for that problem. But we also were very interested in building an investment tool for women. And we had a partner who came in who wanted to be a partner at the studio, who is an amazing influencer, educator when it comes to finance, and very specifically women, and focusing on the future of their own individual wealth. And so it was like, okay, Tess, we have this idea. How can you help us build this? And she immediately was like, I've always wanted to build something like this, but I know nothing about the tech side of it and how to get started. And so it was a perfect match.
Wow. Okay. So tell us a little bit more about how that tech works.
Which tech? The Dove?
Both. Tell us about how both work, because they're both very different, but super interesting.
Yeah. So also both in the very early stages. So Dove is somewhat like a proxy. It's an app that has multiple tools for dementia patients and their caregivers that has the intent of improving quality of life, but also reducing agitation, which helps both parties. So if you know anyone who has had a family member suffering through dementia, you understand that it's not just hard for the person with dementia, it's also hard on the family member. And there's nothing more terrible than the idea of this sort of friction in a relationship towards the end of life. So what Allison has created is this app that has different tools within it, but one piece of it is really this proxy that if you were unavailable, or if your family member was calling you 5 or 6 times already that day with the same exact question, that they could get this proxy that could answer the question, but also divert the conversation into something that would reduce that agitation.
Interesting.
And it uses the AI to learn what works. It uses it to mimic your voice. There's a lot of pieces to it that will really have an impact. And it's really exciting. Again, like, just built the prototype at one of our hackathons a few months ago, and it's exciting to see how it can work. And then for the investment app, which we are in the process of naming right now, and I'm very excited to finalize what that name will be. The idea is it's not just a tool for being able to place your investments and understand where they are going. There's lots of those that exist, but it's something that understands the behavior of women when they're engaging with money and with technology. So combining those two things. So I like to say sometimes, like, E-Trade meets Noom. There's a little bit of accountability, education. There is this idea of community that also will, motivate each other in the aspect. And ideally, at the end of the day, really change the entire mindset that women have about how they invest in their futures. And I know, being someone who had a very specific idea of what that was supposed to be, and growing up and learning, there's men out there doing it a lot differently. So how do we create something that changes our mindset, but to what works for us, not what works in a male mindset?
Wow, interesting. So you're building these 2 companies. One was built from within and one was somebody's idea that you brought in. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then what happens?
So the reason the studio model is what we believe to be the most effective model for women is that there's 4 different stages of basic journey of a founder, and we get to provide those services. So as a co-founder, like, Fierce Foundry is a co-founder with that woman, and we are basically giving them our resources that we have vetted, and also will negotiate everything from the costs to timelines. We'll come in. Ideation and research is the first piece of it. We're utilizing our partners to build, like, very lightweight brand development and get a web page up that's going to help with a lot of things, from fundraising to building wait lists and things like that. So we basically provide experts at each of those stages. So ideation, then building a beta and a prototype, doing some testing, product market fit. Then at that point in time, we determine whether or not we need to get further investments. And if we need to do that, then we bring in our fundraising experts, and they help us to do that. If not, we continue on to the build, and we grow, scale. And then the last piece is exit, where we have exit strategists like the famous Carrie Kirpin, who would come in and help us through that process. In fact, they would come in at that same point that I was saying, do we need to fundraise? That's early on, thinking about all of those pieces. So for us, it's, you continue to build, you continue to develop the relationships, the partnerships, understand the customer. In the case of these 2, because they are not non-technical founders and they come from the expertise of what the audience needs. So in this case, we're providing all of the other resources that they're needing. In fact, next week, I think they're doing financial modeling with one of our experts. But there's also this other layer on top of that. So there's a build, and then there's founder development. So it's not as if we're doing everything for them. We need them to learn how to run a business as well. So
Right.
there's come a point where they're going to be running their own books, hiring people, all of those pieces that a lot of first-time founders will stumble along the way, make those mistakes. So the objective is to really prevent as many of those sort of stumbles from happening, so that we can move faster and we can move with quality control, and in the end, really de-risk the entire journey to getting to that endpoint.
And then how does it work? Like, from an equity standpoint, does Fierce Foundry take some equity as the co-founder? And how long do you call yourself a co-founder? Like, forever? Or?
We haven't gotten to the point of that, the length or the duration. We have a couple different ways that we've written up that section of the agreement. And because we don't have the investment piece of that yet, that's still to be determined. But I have a
They
feeling
haven't actually raised their first price round yet.
that's correct.
Okay, got it.
And where most studio models will take anywhere from 20 to 90% equity.
90%.
That's right. Keep in mind, if they're coming up with the ideas,
Right, that's true. Yeah.
then they're just hiring a CEO. In our case, it's really important that these women go on to exit and have the money to invest in more women. Our ultimate objective is to really benefit that flywheel and really activate what we can into that ecosystem. So with that, we're looking at anywhere from 20 to 35% equity, depending upon what it is we're building.
Got it. Very interesting. And so you were talking about this is a really good model for women because you're taking them through the process and you're also teaching them not just how to get the company started, but how to sustain it and keep it going, right?
Absolutely. I also think, and this is obviously you're the expert here, but women really struggle between that pre-seed and seed to Series A, right? For anybody who's listening who doesn't know, it can be really challenging to get the money to really go to market, especially in tech, especially if it's a SaaS product. Female founded companies really struggle with that, which is mind blowing considering how successful these companies can be when they do raise that money. A big piece and benefit to the studio is that we can support those fundraising efforts. And so I think that's like the first thread is, okay, we're going to support you in making sure that you have the money you need to keep this going. That's a big piece of it. I also think that the time to market is one piece, but then the time to exit is another.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're spending less time learning as we go and really focusing on what we need and bringing in the experts to figure that out, then we can potentially exit in less than 7 years. Studio models traditionally exit between 5 and 7, and always less than startups that are out there on their own. And I think that's an important piece too. Even the founders that we have today, you can see it in their eye that they're like, oh, when I'm done with this, I'm going to build this.
Right.
Thing. How we can help that to happen is really important too.
Yeah, geez. The market has been pretty dry for exits for a couple of years now. So we would definitely take a strategy that speeds up the exit process.
Yeah. And I've met other women who are looking to launch studios too. The challenge is this. The majority of the studio models out there are a result of an exit. So a male founder has sold their company or IPO'd and now has this money and they want to create their own thing. They don't want to go the traditional VC route, but they want to be involved in a different way. And so they create these studio models. Women don't have that kind of money to go out and launch a studio with. So it's even harder for us to just get off the ground. But I think once we start doing this and we see people learning what ways that they can get this up and running, then we'll see more of it happening.
So then isn't Fierce Foundry, don't you have a WeFunder right now?
We do. We do have a WeFunder. If you go to wefunder.com/Fierce Foundry, it's a rev share campaign. So it's basically like you're investing in like a loan for us is I guess the easiest way to explain it. And there's a 1.3x return with a minimum investment of $100. So you could come in, invest $100. You do not need to be an accredited investor. And once we start generating revenue as a company, which it's not just about the companies we're building, we have other revenue streams that we're building as well, because we have to think differently as women. And once the revenue starts to be generated, then we will we'll take a portion of our revenue and pay back those investors.
Up to a 1.35x.
That's correct.
Once they're paid back, then they're done.
Then they're done. Yep.
But that's a different model than I shouldn't say traditional, because a lot of things on these crowdfunding platforms are different, which is cool. But in some cases, people would go to WeFunder, they'd find a company, they would invest their $100 or $200 or whatever it is, and then they would have to wait.
Yeah.
Like we just talked about, 7 years or however long it is until the company exits before they would see any money. In this case, you're saying people would make the investment, but then they could see the money back plus that small return in a year or 2 years, whatever it is, a shorter period of time.
Yeah. So if you have money just sitting in a bank, you wanted something that has impact with some of that, then head on over to our WeFunder. And
you make a good point, because you're actually doing something. Everything has risk to it. You could potentially lose your money, but in this case, if you got your money paid back, you were also helping to get more funding and more resources to female founders, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent.
And listen, the money that we're raising right now, again, is so that we can have that proof of concept. So no matter what, we're going to be building these companies. And we've been very lucky to have individuals who are willing to work pro bono or fractionally until we have been fully funded in order to execute. So we're going to keep moving and don't plan on stopping.
And so what's the goal? What does Fierce Foundry look like in, say, 3 years?
In 3 years, my real hope is that somebody takes the model and duplicates it, so that there's multiple similar studio models out there, and that we've provided a blueprint that works really well and allows female founders to move faster with confidence and be able to go out and invest in more women. If we can change some of the statistics, moving that less than 2% of funding goes to female founders, that's going to take time. I understand that. But if we could maybe move the needle in terms of investing and everything from getting more angel investors out there to, I don't know, even changing up what that ecosystem really looks like, I feel like that's success. So that's on the very high, our vision level. On a sort of more mission, here we are, we're doing the work level. Ideally, we've raised a fund where we're now bringing in and building 3 to 5 companies a year. And the 2 companies we have now are effectively out in market, and we're having an impact with those products as well.
That's awesome. And you said it earlier, there's a lot of men who have had exits who are able to then give back and do a lot with the money that they've made from those exits. We need more female founders to have those bigger exits, and we just haven't had enough at bats yet, I don't think, to get and in a market that will allow for that. The fundraising market has just been so horrific since COVID. Right after COVID, it was great. 2021 was like a heyday, but starting in 2022, and it still hasn't ended, has just been a real dry spell. It's just been really challenging. We need those female founders to have the opportunities to showcase what they can do.
Absolutely. And I think also when you think about this model, I'm a fan of accelerators, and I'm a fan of any organization that supports female founders in this way.
Yeah.
I think in the studio model, when we think about the level of support that a founder is going to receive, it's just increasing the likelihood of getting to that exit. And for that reason, I'm hopeful that if there are accelerators out there that are looking to do something different, they'll think about this. Because also when you think about the investment and going in and obtaining that investment, we should be in a really good position to show how these products are working in a way that investors won't be able to say no to them. As that money, I get that investors are at a point where they really want to be secure in that investment and what they're investing in. And so hopefully this kind of a model gives them that peace of mind.
I love it. Melissa, where can people find you and get more information about Fierce Foundry?
Yeah. So obviously, please follow us on Instagram at Fierce Foundry. That's the easiest one. I can be reached at melissa@thefiercefoundry.com. I welcome anyone who wants to learn more, whether you're a founder who's got a great idea or someone who doesn't have any idea but wants to build something great. Please reach out. Partners and of course investors, because after this WeFunder, we will be going out to raise another fund. I'd love to connect and tell you more about what we're building.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on the Angel Next Door podcast and telling us all about studios.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Marcia.
Thanks for listening. To connect with me, visit my website at marciadawood.com. And please subscribe, follow, and leave a review. It helps the podcast get seen by more people. And remember, you can also find the Angel Next Door podcast on YouTube too. And if you're looking to learn more about investing in the changes you want to see in the world, sign up for Ann and Bill Payne's ACA Angel University classes. Go to theangelcapitalassociation.org, all one word, to find out the schedule. And classes are now available on demand. Many classes are offered, everything from angel investing basics, which include fundamentals, risk, due diligence, term sheets, valuations, returns and portfolio strategy, and even a class on group formation. There's even a deeper dive where you can get advanced classes, including capitalization tables, startup boards, and exit strategies. If you're not already a member of the Angel Capital Association, you can become one for a low price that will give you unparalleled access to discounts, free webinars with a huge archive of content, networking opportunities, and much more. We'd love to have you join us. All content for this website is informational and not intended to serve as legal, tax, accounting, or investing advice. Well, Marcia, that's me, does serve on the SEC Small Business Capital Formation Advisory Committee. My views are my own and not the views of the SEC or my fellow colleagues on the committee. Our speakers and hosts are thoughtfully selected for their educational value, but their opinions are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of the host, me, or the Angel Capital Association. and neither specifically endorse the use of presenters' products or services. Listeners of the podcast should consult their own tax, investing, legal, or accounting advisors before making important financial decisions. All warranties, including accuracy, completeness, and suitability for specific purpose, are disclaimed.